There we go. I'm going to share my screen. This is always the excitement to see whether this works. So do that. Go there, and then swap presenter view, and hopefully you're seeing my slides there. Okay, so little content warning. We do show a few road crashes. They're not nothing graphic, but we're trying to learn from how some of these crashes happen and how they result in trauma. So if that's something that may disturb you, I just give you a warning now. As I say, nothing graphic, just a few crash scenes. And Emma is with us, and Emma's our program administrator for this course. And so Emma's your go-to person. Just a note, if you can't make a session or you're having technical issues or have any questions about the logistics or admin of the course, contact Emma. Emma sent you an email, I believe, already. Her contact details are there. So Emma's popped in to say hi.
Hi.
There she is. I'll hand over to Emma in a second. I'll just introduce myself very briefly. So I'm the principal engineer at Safe System Solutions, which is a specialist road safety consultancy I set up about 8 years ago after leaving the Victorian government, where I worked in road safety, engineering, road design, and a few other planning strategy areas as well. So I've put a little QR code there to my LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn as a platform just to share information. I mean, road safety is just an ongoing learning, and we're all trying new things and trying to improve things. So I like to share stuff through there. So feel free to connect with me there, and my contact details are there. Of course, if there's any questions on technical content or the like, please get in contact with me. Now, Emma, I'll hand over to you to explain Moodle, if you'd like.
Thanks, Ken. I'll welcome everyone as well. So as well as these live sessions, we use our learning management system, Moodle. So basically for the in-between and the content storage. I've sent you links to Moodle. It would have come from Safe System Solutions. So if you haven't received the email, check your junk. It often goes there, often with big organizations go to junk and things like that. So just check that. If you haven't received it, certainly shoot me an email and I can send the login details again. This is where you'll be able to access all the slides that Ken shows you, any videos and all of that sort of thing, as well as accessing the quiz for the end of each session. So we've got 3 sessions for this program, and at the end of each one, you'll need to do a quiz. Also with module 2, you'll be required to do a little assessment as well, an assessment task, which Ken will take you through during module 2. And that will just be able to download the document, and then when you just need to drag and drop it back into Moodle. And that's about it. And at the end, when you've finished all the work requirements and things like that, you'll be able to download your certificate of completion once you have filled in the feedback form as well. So if you do have any access issues or any other administrative questions, certainly shoot me an email or give me a call. My mobile number, I'm working remotely, is in my email signature as well. I'm more than happy to chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma. And yeah, so you will get familiar with Moodle if you are not already, and don't get too concerned about these quizzes and assessment tasks. You'll get lots of information about how to do them, and you have a number of attempts at them should you need, which I don't think you will, but that's always there. Couple of little things to keep you engaged with the content. Little tricks we've developed. Before the pandemic, I never ran online training and always did it in person. But we've done a few little things in our online training to try to keep you engaged. So we've got the quizzes and assignments at the end of each session. We've got different activities throughout the session that you'll get involved in, and you also have to keep an eye out for Wally the Wombat. Now, Wally the Wombat warning sign here will just appear a random number of times in each session, and that's just one of your quiz questions to tell us how many times did Wally appear, just to make sure you're not doing too many emails on the side or anything like that. So keep an eye out for Wally. That is not a Wally include. That's what Wally looks like, but your Wally count is 0. So I'm going to cross that one out. Your Wally count is 0 at the moment. We do have a competency benchmark. We want to be sure that people coming out of our course have a level of sort of competency around safe system principles. And we set a 80% pass mark on our quizzes and assignment. So it sounds high, but as I say, I think if you engage with the sessions, you won't find that hard at all. And you do have up to 3 attempts. And my suggestion is, if you have that first attempt and you don't do so well, that you organise this one-on-one coaching or chat with myself, and we'll have a one-on-one Teams catch up or something like that. We'll just work through the bits that you're struggling to get your head around. So at that point, I'll pause and ask if there's any questions about the sort of running of the course over the next 3 sessions. Anybody want to clarify anything? Now, feel free to use the chat or just unmute yourself with a group like this. That's fine to just sort of unmute and speak. But if you want to just pop some ideas in the chat, or even thoughts, things that you find interesting or want to chat with others about, pop some chats in there. But thanks, Emma. Thank you for popping in and saying hi. Keep in contact with Emma if you have any questions about the admin of the course.
No problem. See you, everyone. Enjoy the program.
Thanks. Okay, couple of things. I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the different lands we're on. Pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I want to give you a couple of other little bits of information. Another one to try to keep you a little bit engaged. I'm going to incentivize you with some possible prizes. And you might be thinking, how is Ken going to give me a prize through the computer? Well, at the end of the session, once you complete everything successfully, you, as Emma said, you can get an electronic copy of your certificate, but we also send you a physical copy of your certificate. And if you've collected any prizes along the way, little trinkets, they'll come in the post as well. And so that'll be me asking questions or you getting involved in different activities and the like. And another little incentive is just before the start of each session, so about 3 minutes before official kickoff, I just do some random trivia questions. And so if you log in a little bit early, you're a chance to win prizes before we even kick off. So log in a little bit early, incentivize you to get in there and make sure everything's working. But let's jump into it. Sorry, I'll pause again. Anybody want to ask anything, make any comments? No, we're all good. Okay. Now, I'm not sure. Actually, I'm just going to, briefly play with my screen here to see if I can get the chat up on the side as well. I'll move that over there. That way, if you did have any questions you wanted to put in to the chat, yes, good. I can see the chat over there and I've got the slides there and everybody's there. I think we're good to go. So we're going to have a bit of a chat about the safe system. Safe system. Have a chat. So this module, what I want to achieve is the principles and the elements or pillars, some people call them, of the safe system, the kinetic energy thresholds of different crash types, the differences between traditional approaches and this safe system approach, citing some best practice on behavioural change and vehicle safety interventions, and give some reasons why speed is so critical to the safe system. So that's what we're going to try to get through. I'll have there'll be a little pause in the middle for you to have a stretch and fill up your coffee if you want, and a little activity for you to do. Now, I'm going to be nice. Wally count is 1. Okay. So the safe system. Oh, Craig, are you? Oh, sorry. No. Okay. The safe system is integral and, in fact, the sort of foundation of road safety strategies across the country. So there's a raft of different road safety strategies from different areas that are underpinned by this thing called the safe system, this philosophy called the safe system. And this is the one that you're working with, your Towards Zero road safety strategy. The safe system is the foundation of your strategy. And the safe system is this sort of philosophical concept. And what I'm going to do is talk at a very sort of philosophical level at the start and get you thinking in that frame of mind. And then as we go through the sessions, we'll drill it down to on the ground. What does that actually mean about what we're doing? So let's start. We're gonna go back in time. Okay, we're gonna go back in time to when the safe system was being adopted by the federal government. Okay, and they were coming up with this diagram, and I was in the road safety department at Vic Roads, the Victorian Road Authority at the time, and we were playing around with different things, and we came up with this this diagram with the federal government and Austroads and a few others. Now, actually, I'll give a prize. So type it into the chat. Get your chat ready, and you're just going to guess the year that the year the federal government adopted the safe system, officially said, we will do road safety under the safe system. And I've given you a clue there. It's in my working lifetime, but then you'd have to have a guess at my age. So, okay. But have a guess. No points off for being wrong. It's just the person who gets closest. Put a year in. Have a guess. Okay, we're seeing some guesses coming in here. See how we're going. Now, Craig, you have been crossed out from winning a prize, by the way. Yep, no, too many years worth of me asking these types of questions. So who then was closest? I think it was Carly. Carly, you are our first prize winner. And it's a surprise as to what the prize is too. And I actually don't know because they pack a little thing with exciting goodies and send it off to you with your certificate. So there were some awesome socks that were sent out. It's usually something that's light enough to be mailed.
If it's as good as the snacks, I'm happy.
Okay, you got your snacks. That's good. Good. All right. In 2004 it was, because Craig was spot on there. 2004. So that's quite a while back, isn't it? Like that we formally committed to this idea of the safe system. And yeah, we've been shaping it and trying to get people doing more safe system things on the ground. And we'll talk about that later. But I want to talk about what this first diagram of the safe system was. And it was taken basically from the Europeans. The Swedes were the sort of leaders in this space, but the Dutch were doing really interesting things. So we sort of took that and said, how does this play out in the Australian context and our philosophy and those sorts of things? And this diagram was presented. I'm going to point out a couple of things on this diagram. Don't worry if you can't read it too well. I'll talk you through it. In the middle there, right at the centre, human tolerance to physical force. That's an interesting thing to start with in road safety, isn't it? Like thinking about, we call this biomechanical tolerance to injury, right? So your how much force can the human body handle before it breaks? So it's an interesting starting point anyway. And then we will talk a lot about that then there were these elements: safer speed, safer vehicles, safer roads and roadsides. And that was really the system. That was it. And then at that time, there was this sort of big challenge and debate going on between sort of segments of the road safety industry. Some were saying, hang on a second here. We are missing like this really vital element. And it's the road user being better, being alert, being compliant, being sort of this road user that's doing the right thing. And then there was the other camp saying, no, we're going to create this impenetrable system, that it doesn't matter how much these people fail, how crazy they do things. It's not going to result. We're not going to let that result in death and serious injury, because our system will intervene. It will, stop the vehicle. It will mean that the energy is transferred, so it's just a fender bender, or some way we will stop it resulting in death or serious injury. And so the two camps were sort of divided. And in the end, there was this sort of what may be a compromise. It was put in there: alert and compliant road users as this overarching square. Now, I was a bit in the camp that said this is a fail. We failed here. We failed by doing that. We failed the whole principles of the safe system by putting that in there, because humans have a tendency not to be alert and compliant all the time. In fact, that is part of us being, we fail quite a bit. We make mistakes all the time. I've made many mistakes already this morning. None have resulted in death or serious injury, I hope. And we will continue to make mistakes. And it's about managing those mistakes. That's an integral part of safe system philosophy. And the idea of putting alert and compliant in this early one really, to me and to a lot of others, gave this get out of jail free card for us to just point and blame in crashes and say, well, they weren't alert. They were, they fell asleep. They were looking at their phone. They were, shouting at the kids in the back seat. Whatever it is that we were saying, this, it gave you the ability to blame the individual and not look at the system and say, how can we alter the system? Anyway, that's the past. And then, there was evolutions of these, and different system diagrams popped up. People really like the circle. The circle got is getting lots of traction, although in the recent road safety conference, there were different non-circle related diagrams of the safe system coming out. But this is really the one that the Tasmanian government has adopted. And you'll notice there that human tolerance to crash impact still at the middle. Okay. Right, that's good. Then around it, it's work to prevent crashes that result in death or serious injury. There's actually quite a bit packed into the wording around that. Okay, it's not saying work to prevent all crashes, is it? And that's important, because it's working to stop those ones that result in death or serious injury, or reduce the severity of those down to tolerable limits. And then we've got around there the elements of the safe system. There are sort of levers that we know we can pull to get better performance and better alignment. And we've got safe vehicles, safe roads and roadsides. Safe road users definitely still in there, and saying that that's an important part of it and will continue to play a role. It's not sort of giving that ability that they have to 100% be alert and compliant all the time. We're going to try to get as much of that as we can, but we recognise within this system that human failure is inevitable. And safe speeds. A couple of other little very sort of specific wording things. It's changed from safer to safe. in this diagram. So there was a lot of, in that previous diagram I showed you, you see it was all safer. We'll just try to improve things a little bit, get a little bit. We're trying to take a fundamental leap now forward to providing actually safe. Now, the one that I would say is we could probably have made this safer. Oh, that's a little R. It's my little squiggle in there. Safer road users, because I don't think we will ever get 100% safe road users. I think the only way to do that would be some sort of, well, non-human yeah, or major genetic engineering or something. Anyway, around the outside here, some really important sort of underpinning things going on around the enforcement, hugely important, understanding crashes and their risks, leadership, emergency medical treatment down here. So in some jurisdictions, that will be its own entity of the safe system. It would have its own sort of element or pillar, as people would call them, but it's sort of seen around there as supporting the system. Licensing, registration, education, supporting road users. So that's the system you're working under. We're at a very high level still. What we talk about with the safe system are some key principles, and they're embedded into your diagram there. One key principle, which I've mentioned a couple of times already, is people make mistakes. Okay, we just have to start saying people are going to make mistakes, and what our job is as system designers, and I should say I consider all of you a system designer. You know, we're in the system and we're designing elements of it, whether it's policy, whether it's the way we communicate it, whether it's the way we design it, whatever it is, you're a system designer. We have to get our head in the space of minimize and manage, right? The idea of complete elimination of mistakes on the road network, it's not going to happen. Well, until it's fully autonomous, and even then there'll be some issues, but minimize mistakes. So we're still going to work on absolutely doing everything we can, and then manage the consequences of these mistakes. We recognize a shared responsibility, and this is shared across all the system designers, all of us, and road users to play their part. But what I do want to say, though, is this shared responsibility doesn't give us an ability to void our responsibility as system designers. So really, if an incident occurs and somebody's done something hideously inappropriate with our thoughts on you know, what should be done, say, well, what we have to do is look at where did our system go wrong. We don't just say, well, we can't design a system if people are going to do that. No, we need to say, how do we alter our system so that can't happen, or that doesn't result in death or serious injury? And we have an aspiration of no death or serious injury. And it's, so this one can be quite divisive, because a lot of people in society will switch off immediately as soon as you say zero death or serious injury on the road network, because they cannot envisage that happening. And that's because they're very focused on today and their past, and you know, how they've interacted with the road network and what they've seen with all the crashes and all the behavioral challenges and all of those things out there. But if we start to say, well, we'll accept we're going to have death and serious injury always, it slightly changes the way we go about setting policy, setting our strategies, setting or designing the network or our systems and the like. And you start to erode and make more and more compromises. If you are able to say, no, it is unacceptable for anybody to be killed or seriously injured, and we need to critically look at every incident and say, what can we alter and what can we change and what can we do about it, and not make compromises in our transport system for other objectives, it keeps you very focused on your target, and it's very aligned with safe system principles. Don't get me wrong, it's a long way away, but it is important, I think, to not just say death and serious injury is inevitable, but to always challenge it. Now, there's quite a number of jurisdictions who have set the date that they believe, using some pretty good modelling, they believe they can achieve zero death and serious injuries on the road network. Now, I'm not sure Tasmania has set a date yet, and Craig will be able to tell me. But if not, I'm going to get you to guess what date Victoria set. So no, not yet. Okay, Craig says not yet. So let's give out another prize. Tell me the date. So this is, the Victorian government has said, we will operate our road network free of death and serious injury. And when I say serious injury, I'm talking about the sort of high end stuff, you know, not just like a broken arm or something like that where you recover, lead a normal healthy life. We're talking higher end serious injury. Have a guess at the year the Victorian government said, yep, that's our date, and we're going to work towards that. Oh, I've got the group that knows their stuff, I see here. We're going to give it to, who is first? Newton, you're on the board. 2050. I'm keeping a track down here of prizes. 2050, yeah. So Victoria's gone 2050, New South Wales gone 2056 with their modelling, and it becomes quite an interesting little exercise once you do that, to say, well, how do we need to transform our system? And yeah, so we've been doing a fair bit of work with both the Victorian and the New South Wales government on that. And my colleague, Johan Strandroth, he works out of Sweden, but he's sort of a world expert in this. But I'm going to explain very briefly why, and especially with this group who's working in sort of a broad space, as to why it's really awesome to actually set a date for zero and then backcast from that. I'll just explain it very quickly here. So if we say that's 2056 or 2050, and this is sort of deaths and serious injuries on the y-axis, and that's today, and up here somewhere, and you draw your you do your modeling and your curves and everything like that, and you set a system, and I won't go into the details of it, it's quite a lengthy exercise, but you get, you know, something like that. And it'll sort of drop it. It's not a linear line. It does a big dive at the end, heavily influenced by technology near the end. But actually, I shouldn't. It's not quite like that. It does have good drops at the start, but it just accelerates its drop later. But anyway, one of the exciting advantages of doing this is that when you've got that curve and you've got your modeling, I'm just going to get rid of that extra line I added, because when you've got that modeling, it means that you can, whoa, it went away, sorry, just trying to get my pen back. It means that every time you make a decision, a policy decision, a strategic decision, an investment decision, you can shift the point that you get to zero based on your model. So if you go, if you come forward with, I don't know, something like a default speed limit of, or 80 kilometers per hour on unsealed roads or something like that, that you could say, well, that's part of our strategy to get to zero 2050. And it goes up the line and the minister says, no, we're not going to be doing that. That's politically, people don't like that. And you can go, okay, minister, that's all right. That pushes us out to 2052. And that's not convincing to a minister, because who cares, right? who in their mind. I mean, yeah, they care, but like 2050, 2052, it's all murky. But when you draw your new line then, and that comes back here, the area under here, well, that's the number of people that decision has cost in terms of deaths and serious injuries. So you can now peg to that policy choice a toll, if you want to call it a toll, which we don't like to call it a toll because that gives an indication, but literally, okay, Minister, that will kill 12 Tasmanians and seriously injure another 70 in our plan. And you've got some pretty hard sort of evidence and numbers there and people. So that's why it's kind of neat to have that date and be able to forecast back. And that area under there, that is our number of Tasmanians killed or seriously injured, or Victorians, or whatever it is. Anyway, I'm slightly off track, but it can help it can help a bit, I think, in some of those decision making. Let me jump out of road safety for a second. Now, you're all people who have used the road in one form or another for quite a number of years, and you'll have a vision of how road safety works, and that will have been built up from a whole lot of different ways. But let's get out of road safety, out of transport altogether, actually. Let's go to manufacturing. Let's go to widget production. So we've got a factory and we're producing widgets, and we're back in the day. This is, back. And the safety culture at a time in widget production back quite a long time ago was what we call a pathological safety culture, where essentially it's up to everybody to protect themselves the best they can. Now, don't get me wrong, people were told as they came into the factory, all right, we're going to pay you, £2 a day, and your job is to clean all these machines, and they're dangerous, and don't put your hands in here, and don't touch this, and stay away from these areas. But these are a really dangerous area. It's up to you to keep yourself safe. And we had kids working in the factories. We had people go out and have lots of beers at lunch and come back and work in the factory, and all sorts of stuff like this happening. And we saw quite a bit of death and serious injury. Lots of people killed, lots of sort of arms ripped off, and different crushing in machines. And then there was this sort of evolution in safety culture, and it went up to what we call the reactive safety culture. And so that machine that kept on ripping people's arms off was looked at and said, okay, we've got to do something here. Maybe we put a little guard on this bit, stop people doing that. Maybe we give everybody a stick and they push stuff in with a stick rather than with their hand, and so stop ripping it off. So you're sort of reactively just addressing the spots that are killing or seriously injuring. Then it sort of evolves from that, and it gets to this is where the economists have jumped in, and they've come to the factory and they've looked around, and they've gone to the factory owner and manager and said, we've done some calculations here, and you're losing a whole lot of productivity in terms of widget production. From downtime with machines stopped, you're having to pay out money to the family of people that have been killed and the like. And we think if you invest £20,000 in improvements to your machines, you will actually save £60,000. These are pounds back in the day. You actually save £60,000 in increased productivity, increased widget production, more sales. And this is good. And the economist then says, I've come up with this new thing called a benefit cost ratio. And that's a benefit cost ratio of 3. So every pound you invest, you get £3 back in return. And so that's sort of what we call a calculating safety culture. We evolve to, and what a safe system really is aiming at, is this proactive safety culture, which says we need this very, very high level of safety, right? And you can produce widgets within up to that. You can't go beyond that. You must achieve that level of safety. And if you can't achieve that, you can't produce widgets, right? We've got to do it safely. And then you need to continuously invest in maintaining that high level of safety and across the board. And that's not like just maintenance of the roads. I mean, that's maintenance of your whole system and continually investing in it. So, I mean, the question is, where do we sit with the road transport system? And I don't think it's I don't think it's that clear cut. And yeah, of course, you're putting a very clear cut safety ladder, safety culture ladder here. I think that we're doing things across the spectrum of these within transport. We just want to shift it more down that end. We certainly have degrees of a pathological safety culture where we know that our system is highly dangerous. We give licenses to young drivers. We pat them on the back and we say, safety is your responsibility, and be safe out there. We know it's dangerous. Be safe out there. We certainly do reactive. We have a whole lot of programs that are reactive in terms of addressing the spots where death and serious injury are occurring. We are very calculating. We love a benefit cost ratio as an industry. We're always looking to do that in the justification of best bang for your buck spend. There's not enough money, so we've got to have lots of calculation on exactly the best way to spend it, and we do. We have to think about how we're going to spend limited funds. I'll talk a little bit more about benefit cost ratios later and why they're maybe not the best way to do it. We do some proactive things, and we're seeing some good examples of proactive stuff in Tasmania, the Midland Highway, for example, the sort of continuous barrier system rollout. I mean, that's quite a proactive treatment when you drill into it, because it's not like you've said, well, this section somebody's had a head-on crash, so we'll put barrier there and we'll leave a big gap, and then this section we'll put a central barrier system. It's continuous. It's recognizing there's a risk throughout, and we're not going to have to wait to see where those crashes happen. I would say that another proactive one that we've done for a long time are school speed zones. Now, I used to manage speed zoning for Victoria for a number of years, and we implemented school speed zones at the time, and we got them in, and we did have some economic analysis of school speed zones, and it is an absolutely horrible investment under our economic evaluation, the way we do traditional economic evaluation of road safety interventions. Right? You would never invest in school speed zones. The reason for that is the way we work out whether an investment is good or not, and this is the way it's sort of always been done, is that we put a dollar value to human life. Right? Now that's kind of grotesque, really, isn't it? But we do. Like, that's how it's been done. So, and you can go to the federal government Bureau of Regional Transport Economics, and you can get the dollar value of human. They will tell you exactly how much you are worth, right? Dollar value of human life. And what we do then is we say, whatever we're going to do is going to cost a certain amount of money. And from our research and science and the like, we can tell you how many lives that will save. And then you can immediately see, is that worth investing in? Now, for school speed zones, what you have to do is you have to take the reduced travel time through the school speed zone, and you also have to equate that to productivity for every Tasmanian. Now, they also will give you a dollar value for an hour of a Tasmanian, and it's something like $88 an hour. Is like that's production to society in their work and whatever else they're doing. So what you do when you do this calculation is you say, how many lives are we going to save by putting this school speed zone in? And And how much is it going to cost us? So what is all the cars and motorbikes and trucks driving through there? And how much extra time is it going to cost each one of them? And you'll go, okay, it's going to cost them 0.5 of a second or or 1 second to go through that. And what you do is you say, well, and there's 20,000 vehicles a day going through there. They go through there every day or during school times, and then you calculate that out and you get this massive number of lost productivity, and you multiply that by your $88 an hour, and you get this whopping big dollar figure of lost productivity, and I'm using quotation marks there. Then you say, well, and we're going to save 25 kids are being killed, and you calculate that out and you say, well, we value a kid at $2.3 million, and we multiply that out, and then you say, well, okay, this actually is a negative benefit cost ratio. So for every dollar we spend on a school speed zone, we only get 55 cents return. So it's not a good investment. But this is where I go, well, we can see how this is it's just preposterous. And in fact, sometimes when people come up with benefit cost ratio arguments around this, I say, well, let's rip out our school speed zones. I mean, that will give us, if under your benefit cost ratio thinking, that will give us a great benefit. And there's just not enough kids that will get killed. And when we do that, yeah, we'll kill some of them. But so the sort of grotesqueness of this idea shows me that we do have hope in that proactive saying that no, like we will accept this, and yes, it'll cost us a bit here and there. There is some ridiculousness around utilizing those very small individual increases in productivity, but anyway, that's a different story. So I think school speed zones are a good one. I think the barriers, and I think some other things we're doing are really good. Any questions before I ask you a question? Has Sweden set a date for Vision Zero? It is a good question, Craig. I'm not sure, actually. I'll ask Yoann and I'll get back to you. It's a good question. Right, any other ones? 2020. Okay. My question for you now, and Craig, you're definitely not allowed to answer this one because I've asked you it, like, you've been in sessions many, many times. Usain Bolt, fastest human we've got. Oh, he was fastest. When he ran that world record 100-meter sprint in Berlin, when he crossed the finish line, what speed do you think he was traveling in kilometers per hour? He's running along, got up to speed. What's he crossing the finish line at? Is he going 100 kilometers an hour? Is he going 5 kilometers an hour? He's probably somewhere in between that. Have a guess. Some of you might be trying to do calculations in your head and converting meters per second to kilometers per hour, and that's going to be a challenge. 35, 40. Okay, I'm going to give it to Jordan with 45. So it's about 44 kilometers an hour. So very, very good there, Jordan. You're on the board. So 44 kilometers per hour. And why do I ask that in a safe system discussion? Well, I want you to now imagine parking let's go with a 2010 Toyota Camry at the end of his lane. And he comes running down there at 44 kilometers an hour. This is the fastest a human has ever gone off the power of their own legs with, not much wind behind them and the like. Bang, he slams into that, 44 kilometers an hour. Will he survive that? Well, the answer is probably yes. We We're pretty confident it's a yes, actually. Now pick any of us mere mortals up, fling us at that car at 44 kilometers per hour. We're getting closer to not surviving that. And certainly we pick any of our grandparents up and fling them at that car at 44 kilometers an hour, they're very unlikely to survive that. So in fact, there's this interesting sort of correlation between your maximum running speed, or a person's maximum running speed, and their ability to withstand physical force running into solid objects. So to test your limits on physical force, you could run full pace at a tree and you'll hit that tree, you'll mess yourself up a bit, but everything says you should recover to lead a normal, healthy life over time. So that'll be the assignment that we're going to do. You're going to, no, of course. It's a nice correlation that that you can imagine. Old people can't run very fast. They can't withstand those forces. And in fact, we have some quite good data around this of cars hitting pedestrians. And this came out of Europe. It's a bit old now, and we're continuing to evolve this thinking. This is still what Austroads uses, still what the jurisdictions use. There's more and more research and evidence appearing as we go, but let's run with this for now. And you'll see down the bottom here, we've got collision speed. This is not speed limit, right? This is the actual speed of impact. And this is for a passenger vehicle striking a pedestrian. And it could be any pedestrian in society. This is based on sort of real crashes. And this is the chance that it will result in death. So you see down here, when pedestrians are struck around 10 or 20 kilometers per hour, it's highly likely that they will survive. About 30 kilometers per hour is where it takes an exponential kick up. It goes really bad, really fast after 30 kilometers an hour. And you can see there up around 60 or 70 kilometers per hour, a direct strike on a pedestrian, we're pretty confident they're going to be killed. Now, of course, there's going to be extreme events either end. We're going to see that, very low speed knockover in a car park that will kill a pedestrian. We're going to see miraculous motorway strikes of a pedestrian where they somehow survive. But this is your general curve. This for, oh, there's the great man. He comes up quite high on the on this one, because remember, this is for all of the community, and he's the Hulk of a human. Okay, let's get rid of you saying, get back into it. Oh, we're showing some more pedestrian striking things, are we? All right, so there we can see. Hope that streamed through for you. That's the kind of stuff we're designed to survive. He broke a few ribs, came back the next year, won the gold medal. So you can lead a normal, healthy life, having these sort of violent strikes. We have this information for other crash types as well. Now, this one is a side impact crash. Now, I'm going to give you some terminology here. This vehicle striking, we call it the bullet vehicle. The bullet vehicle is the one that's doing the damage in a crash. Okay, this is the target vehicle. So this curve is on bullet vehicle speeds. And it's the target vehicle driver in this case, or if it was passenger side, strike passenger side, that is getting killed. The side of the vehicles are not very well designed to cater for impacts. The front of the vehicle is pretty good. It's got the airbags, crumple zones, seat belts, everything's got to kick it into play there. The side has got, maybe if you're lucky, a very, very thin side curtain airbag, which I'll show you later is doing something, but not a huge amount. Anyway, this one we see, 30, 40 kilometers per hour, highly likely to survive. Up around 80, 90, 100 kilometers per hour, highly likely there's going to be death. And that exponential kick up happens around the 50 kilometers per hour. So around 50, it goes really bad, really quick as you increase that speed. Head-on crashes, we see this up even further. And this is because you're engaging with that front of the vehicle in terms of the crumple zones, the airbags, the seatbelts, all that stuff I mentioned. And we can see there around the 50, 60 kilometers per hour, fairly likely to survive, up around the 100, 110, highly likely to be killed. And about the 70 kilometers per hour is that exponential kick up, really bad, really quick, higher than 70 kilometers per hour when that frontal crash happens. As I say, there's a bit more work being done on this to look at the Australian context, to add serious injuries into this and things like that. But this is fairly well recognised, and it's pretty appropriate we just sort of stick to this for now. And we can get that line around the 30 kilometers per hour pedestrian areas, 50 kilometers per hour for side impact, 70 kilometers per hour for head on. And those are what we tend to refer to as our threshold speeds under the safe system. We're trying to keep everything less than that when that crash type could occur. Now, if you want to travel faster than that, that's fine. If you want your network to travel faster than that for passenger vehicles, that's fine. We just got to try to work out ways so this crash can't happen or the energies are dissipated. So, for example, if you want to operate the Midland Highway at greater than 70 kilometers per hour and align well with safe system principles, you just make sure that people can't head on crash each other. And that will help you with this one, because hitting a barrier, you can do at much higher speeds than 70 kilometers an hour and have very, very good chance of surviving. So you're addressing that head-on crash risk using separation. And you can sort of go through the others. Here's a little table that we produced, and this will go into some of the Austroads guides shortly. They're just getting signed off at the moment, one of them. But it's trying to sort of say that there's a bit more to that. There's larger vehicles, there's motorcycles, there's and so if we look here at different crash types, you know, a cyclist with a car, pedestrian with a car, crashing into a tree, and we can sort of then grade that. And it's not a clear cut grade, but we know up here is high death, serious injury. Down here is fairly survivable, and you can start to piece that together. I put some numbers to that, which is something we use in safe system assessments, which we're not going to go into detail, but it shows you that it's sort of a bit of a graduation, and you take into account the weights of the vehicles, the types of the crash, and you're starting to get more and more indication there. I'm going to give you a couple more slides and then get you to do an exercise, and we're going to have a little stretch break shortly. But do pop any questions. Here we go. We've got questions come in. For head-on crashes, are both cars moving or one stationary? What a great question. So they are both moving at 70 kilometers per hour. So they would have a closing speed of 140 kilometers per hour. The actual crash force on each driver or each passenger is a 70 kilometer per hour crash, because what kills or seriously injures in road crashes is the deceleration. And so assuming that they're both the same weight, traveling at the same speed, they come in, they hit each other, and they go from 70 kilometers per hour to 0. So it's actually the equivalent of running into a brick wall at 70 kilometers per hour. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a link to a Mythbusters episode that actually crashes cars in exactly these scenarios to work out that force, because there was lots of argument that there was a reactive force, that you were getting double the force. Well, no, the individual occupants are only getting that force. The only way you'd get double the force if you were standing in the middle of it and you got squashed, or you were in a tiny little, what are those mini micro cars, and it was like a B double truck, and you came in at 70 and went back at 70. Then you're subject to 140 k's of force. But I'll send you that Mythbusters episode. Nothing like watching Mythbusters on work time. That's always important road safety stuff. Right. Now, some of you may have seen this diagram because it gets used a lot in road safety, and it, to a degree, is the bane of my existence. But it's not. That's not because it's wrong, right? It's because of how people use it. So what this diagram is representation of crash causation studies. Now, a crash causation study is basically you get a heap of crashes and you analyze them in really great detail, and you do root cause analysis, and you really try to drill into why these crashes are happening. And I think that, that's wonderful stuff to happen. And we saw some presentations in the recent road safety conference on just amazing sort of analysis into why events are occurring. What they always come down to, and this has been happening for like 50 years, and it's like they seem to just get bigger and bigger. World's biggest crash causation study. We took 4,000 crashes and did, they always come down to around 94, sorry, seems to be the one everybody goes to. 94% of crash causation is the road user. And I say driver there, I should say road user. I took this out of an Austroads document. Road user. Right, 94% of crash causation is the human doing something wrong or failing. The road plays a role in some of that, and there's a bit so there's a big overlap there, and the road's playing a bit of a role. Something's just deceived them. They think the road goes straight through, but it actually turns, whatever it has been. And then the vehicle plays a very small role. So like a tire blowout or a brake malfunction is very small bit. Okay, I do not dispute this. Just amazing people who have done that. But what the natural reaction then is, well, let's address the biggest problem. That's what you do. You find what the biggest problem is and you address the biggest problem. And so then people get into, let's change the human. Now, the human is one of the hardest things to change in our system. And I'm not saying we can't get better performance out of our road users, but according to this, we would invest 94% of our effort on the human. And that's sometimes how people see road safety and how we're going to fix it. And the public are very drawn to this idea because in their mind, if you get better drivers, we'll have less death and serious injury. Now, the reality is that we're not going to get the benefit by addressing that much effort on trying to alter humans. And what we need to do is look at changing this system, changing the road. So the mistakes are still happening. And maybe we get that from 94% and we whittle it down a bit. But mistakes are still going to be happening, and we need to manage those within the system. So our system, so what we need to do is say, no, the crash occurred and it was a system failure because the humans made a mistake and the system hasn't intervened to stop it being death or serious injury. Now, this Austroads document put these things outside of it, driver excess and driver inexperience. I would tend to just put them in there because that's just a system failure as well. If a driver is driving at 180 down the wrong way, down the wrong side of the Tasman highway, the system has failed to let that happen in one way or another. But that's kind of been put out there because they slightly possibly get addressed in very different ways to how we would treat the rest of the system. And very quickly, I'll just remind you here that failure in the transport system is not all deliberate violations like I just mentioned there. Like the media has this often thing that they will produce this image of our road trauma problem being just deliberate violators. That super high speed through a residential area, or the ice addict doing whatever. Now, there is an element of that going on in our society, but there is a huge amount of human error that sits above that, which is what we call slips, lapses, mistakes, or unintentional violations. It's generally pretty much normal people going about their business and having human failures the way they do. This accounts for somewhere around 30 to 35% of death and serious injury, probably a bit more for fatalities, out closer to the 40%. But death and serious injury, it's down 30, 35%. There's an Austroads report, catering for human error in the transport system, which sort of delves into this in a lot of detail. I sort of think we need some big societal changes around that, outside of just the roads and the like, and so it's a social problem. I mean, the usual saying is people drive the way they live, and so we've got sort of how do we alter people's the way they live. But I'm not going to sort of focus in too much on that. I'll talk about it a little bit. But we've got our overwhelming majority of road trauma is just people going about their usual business and making fairly human mistakes. How that's exactly defined is, it's a big report. So what I want to do is give you now 5 minutes to have a look at this. And you're going to have a stretch. You can fill your coffee up or whatever. You've got 5 minutes to do this. What I want you to do is take the traditional approach to road safety over here and the safe system approach and just connect them up. So you can just jot this on a bit of paper or something. So you would go, so we used to do victim blaming to a degree, and we'd say, well, they were speeding and they've been killed. They didn't take responsibility for their own safety. Yeah. That's sort of victim blaming. Where are we going to with the safe system? Now, I'll be upfront now to say that there's a few that could go to multiple places. So don't get too concerned. You're not going to get marked on this. This is not one of your tests where you're marked. This is just to reinforce that thinking. So just on a bit of paper, jot down like maybe 1B, 2C, 3A, whatever you think it is. Once you've done that, have a stretch, and we'll come back in 4 minutes. Oh, sorry. Should be there again, hopefully. Okay. Now, hopefully a few of you are back. Oh, yes, that's very good. Here you are. Good, excellent. Welcome back. Now, I am going to show you a few of the answers that popped up here. And as I say, don't get too concerned if you went to another one, because a few of them could go to a few. But victim blaming is really now we're recognising human error and trying to minimise its consequences. We've got that shared responsibility. There used to be an emphasis on road user education and compliance, and now there is an effort to create a forgiving system. We're not ignoring road user education and compliance. There's just more of that effort to create that forgiving system. A focus on crash reductions. Now it's enhanced focus on consequence, especially severe injury minimisation. 4 pillars or 4 elements action independently. And now we're trying to optimize them jointly as an interaction. Now, there is a huge interlink between these elements of the SAFE system, and it's quite fascinating to sort of drill into that. So, the mobility safety balance, so was trying to find, let's just make it about right. And now it's moving to this safe mobility, which is to set that criteria for safety and then get as much mobility around that as we possibly can. So that was just a little exercise to sort of help you and reinforce a little bit of thinking. As I say, I don't get too concerned with some of them. You might have gone to another. Okay. Ian Cameron, who is a Western Australian, made this statement. I think it's a really nice summary of this sort of philosophy. We need a paradigm shift in road safety policy to stop the road death epidemic, and we need it now. It is unrealistic to expect that education and enforcement alone will bring the needed step change. Even road users who know and follow the rules make mistakes. A safe system creates an environment in which a simple mistake will no longer kill people. Maybe kill and seriously injure people would have been good to say the end. I think it sums it up quite nicely. All right, I'm going to do a couple of little case studies, and then I'm going to move a little bit quicker through some content just to cover some stuff off. But I will get you involved in this one. This is the Melba Highway. So this is in Victoria, but it's got some elements fairly similar to the Midland Highway in lots of points. And it used to have a centre line, no barrier, right? And here's another section of it now. It's now got the barrier, and this was quite a new thing for Victoria at the time, as in these narrow sort of flush medians to put a barrier system like this. So without knowing much at all about this project, or you don't even know, need to know anything about really engineering, just maybe jot down a few things that you think might have been big, huge hurdles for the project team to actually get this in place. So have a think about that. Why might it have been a challenge for them? So just jot a couple of ideas into the chat if you've got any. So it's a center line, and now we're trying to put this barrier down the middle. What are the project challenges to work through? And jot a couple into the chat if you can do that, or feel free to unmute yourself and just tell me if you'd prefer to do it that way.
Did motorcyclists crack at about the wire rope?
They did, yes. Go, you're on to one of the challenges. Yes, so we had the motorcyclists getting angry. Interestingly, those little cushions at the bottom of those wire rope posts are one way to try to address some of that challenge. But yes, the motorcyclist was one.
Emergency services team turning opportunities?
Yes, emergency services are in multiple ways there. So yeah, turning opportunities, and yeah, ability to get to yeah. So they had to go all the way down the road to come back if the bush was on fire, or a house was on fire, or there was a crash or the like. Yep. So that was certainly one. Community discourse and opinion. Yes, the community get quite. It's amazing in road safety, and I'm sure you're already finding this, that everybody has a very strong opinion, and you know, it's based on their experience. They've had a lot of experience driving and walking and riding the network, and they're quite sure. Some of them are quite sure they know what the answers are in our industry. Now that's actually a challenge, especially for all of you, those who are new to road safety, is to be evidence-based, because you will naturally come in with a set of opinions, and everybody does to road safety, and they'll be based on your personal experience, and you can't make policy decisions based on personal experience. You've got to look at the evidence as to what it actually is. And there's a couple of specific examples I'll give later on this sort of stuff. So yes, the community was very vocal in a number of different ways at looking at this. Any other ideas?
I'm going to have a guess about the landscape or something, because it's obviously 2 lanes on one side and not on the other.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. So the overtaking opportunities was one that sort of came up, and it sort of links with that, where you imagine if you're driving along this road and there's a barrier and there's one lane, you can't overtake anybody regardless if there's something coming the other way or not. And yeah, getting stuck behind slower vehicles, also having over-dimensional vehicles like you know, large towing you see that truck with a house on it and those sorts of things. How do they get through here? Private property access, another big one that came up, and blocking off access and making them drive down the road. The maintenance of the road, the ability to, you know, maintain the asset, so the barrier itself, but also maintain the surface of the road. So how do the crews actually get there and patch up potholes and those sorts of things? Because where can they can't send cars around them because they're in the middle of the road and the middle is blocked off. So those were certainly a number of different issues. There were some technical issues with this barrier, and when a wire rope safety barrier gets hit, the posts break away and the whole thing deflects, and it deflects. This one will deflect into the oncoming lane, and that was that put about a year's worth. It added about a year to the project because the technical committee said that barrier doesn't comply with the standards, and the argument then was, well, surely it's better than a white line down the middle of the road. And, you know, they were saying yes, but it doesn't comply. And anyway, that debate went on for a long time. Breakdown of vehicles was another, absolutely another one. And getting trapped, and how do you get off the road, and animals crossing the road, and, you know, are they going to get trapped in this, and how are they going to get out? And so the thing is that with something which is so as obvious as this protecting the biggest risk we have on this road, which is head-on crashes, there is a huge amount of work to do in trying to convince the community and technical people and others that this is a good thing. But if you stand back and you look at it, it's very much a wonderful thing. And in this road, it's just performing beautifully. And you'll find that the Midland Highway will perform beautifully from a crash perspective. But what our role is to work through respectfully all of those challenges and try and work out ways to try to alleviate some of that risk. And what I want you to do after this session at some point is have a look in Moodle at a little video of when this barrier got hit. The person that didn't hit the barrier, they were the one coming the other direction that would have got hit, called up the road authority and said, I've been driving this road for 20 years, and yeah, somebody in your office put this barrier in, and I think you saved my life. And they, of course, being good comms and engagement thinkers, quickly called up their comms and engagement team, who found those people and took a film crew and made a wonderful little 2-minute video. But the video, to me, and really do encourage you to watch it, it is Safe System in action, because somebody has made a mistake. They've fallen asleep. They're not a bad person. In fact, you'll see they're quite a lovely person from the appearance. They've fallen asleep. They've left their lane. Had the barrier not been there, they would have head-on crashed, and there would likely be death or at least serious injury as a result. But the system intervened. The barrier just did its job, didn't care why, who it was, why. It just redirected them along, and we have an outcome where we're not blaming, and we've got people who are have survived, and so that's, to me, a great example. I would love the person not to have fallen asleep. I'd love them to have had a great night's sleep and not driven when they're tired. And we need to continue to work on that, but we're going to have a huge amount of that sort of stuff happening. How do we manage those mistakes? And yeah, there was a similar one on the Midland, and Craig sent me that video. Oh, was that the Midland, that one? Yeah, Craig sent me that video. I posted that online very quickly, and yeah, another great example. The thing, though, is that we have like multiple layers where we can intervene, and it's not just the infrastructure that I put there, but the vehicle could intervene. We could have the speed somehow intervene. We could have the people intervene. And the Swiss cheese model, I think, originally developed US Postal Services to analyze why packages were arriving damaged. And they come up with this model, and they call it Swiss cheese model. And basically, for a crash to happen, you have to find a hole in each of these slices of Swiss cheese to get through. And if you can close off holes in the Swiss cheese or make holes smaller, you're changing that. But you've got all of these layers of redundancy to work with, where you can break that chain of events. Okay, so it's good interaction there. I want to now jump through a few of these elements of the safety. I call them elements rather than pillars. That's a personal preference. I don't mind people using the term pillars. I just don't want anybody to ever think that these work as silos, right? To say that, because they are hugely interacting elements. I mean, people and speed, for example, I mean, that they're intertwined. They might as well be the same sort of entity. It's quite a interacting dynamic system. I'm just going to work through a few of these, and I'm only going to give you a small little window of insight. I'm going to point you at some research and further reading, and I'm sure some of you have got better insights than I do in different specific parts of this, but I'll give you a few little things. And regardless of whether or not you are working in the space that we're talking about, it's really important, I think, as a road safety professional, to just have a sort of a base level knowledge on some of the things that work and don't work in these different areas. If you're ever stuck for conversation at a barbecue, you just say, "Oh, I work in road safety. What do you think we could do to improve the system?" And they'll give you insights, and then you can have a bit of discussion back. Let's talk about the road users, though. And I don't want anybody to ever think that a safe system is ignoring improved road use, right? It's part of the system. We just recognize the limitations. But we know we can get improvements in road use through education, encouragement, enforcement, and then some sort of licensing system, which I put graduated licensing. I mean, it's entry to the system, how you let people into the system and not in the system. I'll start with education. And we know, and it's not just in road safety, the easiest to educate are the little humans, and they react very well and take messages on board really well, and they alter their behaviour, and they can also be used as a nice little conduit to change their parents' behaviour. So you can instill messages that get fed in every time they get in a car, like, "Mum, put your seatbelt on. You have to wear your seatbelt," and that sort of stuff. So we can get some good movement there. Educating young drivers in safe driving practices, there's a lot of work and research and evidence that has gone into this, and a few things have been discovered. First of all, that just time spent out on the road network, the public road network, with a supervising driver is about the best we can do in terms of getting them to understand how to manage risk on the road network. Going to an advanced driver training course, like a high speed, learning how to get out of skids and those sort of things, will make them more likely to be killed or seriously injured. It's counterintuitive, and the public just cannot get their head around this, but this is one of the most well-researched things in road safety around the world. The reason for it is that they gain a new set of skills, right? But their confidence goes up so much that they come out and take more risks. And so they might get this much benefit in terms of safety, but they get this much benefit or this much disbenefit in terms of increased risk taking. And so we just see bad outcomes happen. Any training courses for drivers, really, it's all of the best results are around strategies for risk management, for not getting in scenarios where a lot of it can be done in the classroom, and basic driver control is all that's needed. Anything at high speed is not going to be a good thing. It's a bit harder to tell with motorcyclists whether that's the same or not. And there's not really conclusive evidence on that. But getting those hours in the car with a supervising driver is really important, and getting our young drivers into safer vehicles. That will be another really beneficial way. One thing in road safety that and education, or even sort of communications in road safety, and I love this ad campaign, which was done by the Transport Accident Commission. In road safety, if we tell an individual not to do an activity like using their mobile phone because they will be involved in a crash, they don't believe us. And the reason for that is, as an individual, the risk of using your mobile phone, now please don't be repeating this publicly, the risk of you using your mobile phone and driving is so small. Like, it is absolutely tiny, right? The risk of you being killed or seriously injured from a crash where you've been using so small, right? But the thing is, we don't look at the risk from that individual perspective. We look at it from the collective perspective. So what we do is we take all the Tasmanians that are using their mobile phones and we add up all those small, tiny bits of risk. And what it comes out to is a decent societal risk. It's a big risk to society using mobile phones. But what we then sometimes do in the communications and talking back is say, this is a big risk to you. They're like, I only do it when it's safe. I'm a good driver. I've been doing it for the last 10 years. I've never had a crash. You know what? They will justify it in their own mind. And it just degrades the realness of that message. You get the same for speed. You reduce the speed limit or put a speed camera in and say we're doing this for your safety. They would just go, no way. I've been driving this road for 40 years. I've never had an issue. I've never seen an issue. This is just revenue raising. Like, of course. But what we have to do is draw them away from your individual risk, because we're talking collective risk and they're hearing individual risk. We're talking a different language. So what you need to do is attack areas that we know are going to resonate with them. And one is their kids in this one. So this beautifully just says, if you text and drive, your kids are going to text and drive. Now they're in on this, because you can't trust the kid. It's and I don't want them to have any more risks, and thus they will actually see some behaviour change out of that. There's some good research. There was some good research to show that people are far more willing to accept a lower speed limit based on the protection of wildlife than they are the protection of humans, because they, in their mind, I think, with road safety, say it's all the crazies and people who shouldn't be doing stuff that are being killed and seriously injured on the road. The animals can't make those calls, that and we've got to slow down to protect the animals. Interesting, isn't it? Like, so we can sort of come in on different platforms in road safety to get some great gains. Livability of a city, active transport, you know, get in there, slide in on the encouragement of active transport, and we're going to get safer and active transport, which is awesome. So, you know, you're going to get win-wins. But talking to that individual about their specific risk is just going to switch off. So some things that work. Whole school approach to education. So getting in from the start and giving education throughout their schooling. Combining with other partner activities, so be that, you know, police, enforcement, or even infrastructure, and trying to sort of gain this partnered strategic approach to education. Community education and community efforts is quite powerful in road safety, and we have an amazing amount of road safety advocates and people that are just piling their own personal time and effort into road safety. And what our role is to ensure what they're doing is evidence-based and actually going to be providing outputs that we know are going to work. It really makes me just so sad to see community groups who are best intentions, and then they will invest their time and their effort into something either we know doesn't work from evidence, or worse, you know, makes things worse. And, you know, a few examples there are the advanced driver training that I talked to you about, where, like, you know, you get a small community and they say, we will put everybody in, you know, every young driver through an advanced driver training course, something like that. And they're reaching into their own pocket to do that. Or, you know, taking them through the morgue or the you know, the trauma ward, and saying, if you don't drive safely, this is what's going to happen to you. And there's evidence, there's research around that to say that's not actually the people that will affect in terms of change are the safest, going to be the safest anyway. They're the ones that resonate with those sorts of messages. Those that are going to take a whole lot more risks, that does not work on them. They are able to just separate from those messages. So yeah, so just getting the community into things that we know will work. Graduated licensing and that time on the road, but graduated licensing basically is saying we know early drivers are our highest risk drivers, and how do we put more controls on them, and then we can let them graduate up and ease the controls off them. So, you know, it could be driving hours, it could be passenger numbers, it could be alcohol content, whatever it is. Especially motivated groups, and we can target those, and parents are the just most motivated groups, and they're a wonderful lever into getting things to happen if you target your messaging the right way and the way you do things. But certainly you can get them to invest in safer vehicles for their kids, and maybe forego the Bali holiday, or you know, change it from a Bali holiday to a I don't know, Queensland holiday or something, and invest that little bit extra in getting a safer vehicle for their young road users, as long as they can see that that's going to be advantage. So you can motivate them. New arrivals have some motivation as well to, I think it's quite a complex interaction as to why, but they quite want to get on board with the ways to use the road system. And so there's some opportunities there. And action programs to change the way a road user uses the road network. There's lots of different things in that. I'll keep moving on. I'll talk a little bit about some that interact with that shortly. And I think I've mentioned these. Oh, I haven't mentioned fear tactics exactly. Generally in road safety behavioural campaigns and the like, fear tactics haven't had huge success in behaviour change. So the idea to scare the hell out of the public and they will change their behaviour goes a little bit back to that, you know, taking them through the trauma ward and those sort of things. We know it can work on some small segments of the population who are pretty risk averse anyway, and we know it can disturb a lot of people. But we also, the one reason you would do it here is if you're going to do legislative change, major legislation. It can be a little bit of a useful driver there, because you get quite big segments of the population understanding why you're putting that law in place or why you're doing other things. So it's a bit complex, but if you want to just get pure behaviour change, it doesn't appear to be that effective. Skill-based driver training I talked about. One-off events, so now you want to coordinate your events and make sure that they're ongoing. Driver simulators, there's nothing that appears in research at the moment that seems to be too useful. I know there's some federal government studies going on and trying to look for new things, so we'll keep an eye on that. Car racing clubs, go-karting clubs, and those sorts of things. Again, it's all around thinking that by giving people better skills, they will be safer. And we know that getting basic skills is important, but beyond that is not giving us any benefit and just starts to increase risk-taking behaviour. Information-only approaches, so just the stats and just putting the stats out there. Again, it's more of a justification for legislative change or interventions rather than actually changing behaviour. And this is an interesting one. I mean, this is some research out of learner drivers. So they're, with a supervising driver, and there's very few crashes, be those, and these are crashes on the side here, crashes, but be those, you can either do this by raw numbers or you can do it by vehicle kilometres travelled, which is the amount that they're actually out there they're driving. But we have very low number of learner drivers. As soon as they step out and get into their car by themselves, the numbers just skyrocket. So and it goes down over time, right? But I use this, I suppose, as an example, and you see this also correlates by vehicle kilometres travelled. Even our 8 to 10 year drivers are nowhere near as safe as our drivers coming out with 0 to 1 years. So anybody that sort of puts forward that it's all about skills, I mean, this shows it's not about skills, is it? There's so many more elements to this. So I think that's it tells quite a story, that little chart, and it tells a story as to why you put more restrictions on these and graduate it out. Encouragement. So incentivizing campaigns seem to have some benefit. There was a bit of work to show that the idea of paying drivers to drive safely has some sort of ability to work. And so, I mean, that's not done by giving them cash. It's done by sort of giving them full license if they don't have any demerit points through their probationary period, or these sort of incentivizing programs. So there's a bit of hope there. Advertising and marketing a specific behavior as part of a coordinated effort seems to work well. So the idea is saying, instead of don't drive fatigued, which is too generic and it's like, yeah, okay. But to say take a break every 2 hours, that's a very specific message behavior. That's more effective and easier to follow. And it's very hard within the road safety sort of behavioural change advertising space to understand what's really working or not, because you can get some info from recall, like do people recall the message? To understand whether it changes a behaviour is a very hard thing to do in road safety. It's easier in other spaces because you just know your sales go up or down or the like, but road safety is far more complex than that. Anyway, we know comedy is effective in recall, and there's been some really creative ads done by different jurisdictions and the Tasmanians in trying to capture that. It works particularly well on young males as well, so they recall, and hopefully we see change. And we're aiming to sort of change a culture around road safety as well, rather than just change these specific isolated elements. So in your memory stick, I put a few different, some of sort of my favourite road safety ads with a bit of that comedy in them. Some of them you will have seen on Tasmanian roads, or sorry, on your roadsides, and then also on your TV and the like. Some of them you may not have seen. So have a look at those. Again, they're just very short, and it's interesting. Changing the culture. There's a lot more messaging now coming around and trying to change this culture. And we see a lot of advertising and messages pushed around trying to instill some of those safe system principles and get the culture thinking that way. So you notice this one, which may have been played in Tasmania as well. It's certainly played in a number of jurisdictions, which talks about other people making mistakes. So that's why you should slow down. And so it's definitely removing it away from you're going to make mistakes, and we're going to do this for your safety, or generic things like speed kills, where you're saying, okay, other people are going to stuff up, so we're going to slow down a bit. Talking to people about that human tolerance to physical force, that I use the Usain Bolt analogy. The TAC used Graham, and they're continuing to use Graham. So Graham is a life-size sculpture thing that is just scarily human looking. And the idea is that Graham is what you would need to look like to survive the forces on the roads. And really targeted at kids throughout their schooling, where they can come in, they can look at Graham. It's part biology, because you can take your iPad around Graham and look inside and see the structure and where things are happening. But then there's also a series of different sort of throughout their education where they can get information. So one of the things we helped the TAC with was creating a module for year 11 physics around speed, braking distance, and then changing the road environment. And Graham sort of transforms back to a human as you do things like lower speed limits, slow things down, put a barrier in the middle of the road. You can get Graham to come back to more to a human. So interesting one there. Now, do pop any questions you have in, or feel free to jump in. We've got about 15 minutes left. I've got a few more things I want to cover, and then check in with you all for any comments. Now, some of you are heavily working in the enforcement space, in the camera program space, and so you're going to be doing lots of research and finding lots of different things out. I suppose the importance of that strategic enforcement effort is big, and we have limited funds in that. So how we target that's important. So thinking strategically about it. And we've got specific deterrence and general deterrence. So specific deterrence in enforcement in road safety is really that if you've been fined for something, the idea is you won't do it again. The general deterrence is that you could be fined for something, and it could be, you could be fined for it anywhere at any time. So you don't need to have been fined for it to alter behavior. And general deterrence, you actually want to have both going on in your enforcement strategy and regime, And visual presence is really quite helpful for that general deterrence. Visual presence and enforcement are probably the immediate, quick ways you can quickly get alterations in your amount of death and serious injury. Heavily expensive, but do show sort of a more immediate effects. Are much more sustainable and long-term are things like our infrastructure and the like, because it's always there, always operating, and always effective. So camera systems, lots going on in that space. Point-to-point cameras are a wonderful feature in terms of giving you better ability to get deterrence throughout a long route. So that's where you take a photo of the number plate at the start of a point, and then a photo down, 10 kilometers down the road or something, and you just work out the time that they've taken, and give them a fine if they have travelled that distance too fast. So that's wonderful. I do often tell the story of the speed lotto, which a few of you might have heard of, which is using similar technology. You can this Swedes did it, and then somebody else has done it as well. I can't remember which country it was, again in Europe, but it's basically the same thing, where you take a photo of the number plate at the start of the 10 kilometers and a photo of the number plate at the end. And yes, if you're speeding, you get fined, but if you're not speeding, you go into the draw to win all the money of the speeders, because they've got your info anyway. And so I think it's a neat little incentivizing and enforcing campaign all rolled into one, and it's a nice way to dispel any revenue raising comments. So maybe one to think about for the future. Tasmania could be the first in Australia to roll that one out in one form or another. The interesting thing around enforcement is we do it in I'm going to talk about speed enforcement, and you're into the camera programs, and that's important. We're going to continue to run that. I mean, but the reality is we've got monitors in vehicles, and we know the speed they're going and where they're going, and we know what speed zone they're in. I mean, the idea of having to place a camera out on the road network is a bit archaic, but it is what we're going to do for a long time. But like Tesla, for example, in the US has just released Tesla insurance, right? So they just said, oh, well, we want in on this insurance game because there's lots of money there. And we know a hell of a lot more about our drivers than anybody else. And but basically, you want Tesla insurance, they look at your driving history in your car. They know exactly how much you speed, how much you don't speed, how quickly you accelerate, how quick you're braking. In fact, they're so good that they know even how many near misses you had because their system had to kick in and take over. They know, like they've got it all there, right? And so then they apportion your insurance accordingly and say, yep, no worries, you're a safe driver, you're going to get this much insurance. The idea that we couldn't speed enforce every individual with either their existing car or a retrofit device like this, which this is my VicRoads car 16 years ago, and we had a device and it would beep at me if I went over the speed limit. It could easily have been connected to the car, so the car couldn't go over the speed limit if we wanted it to do that 16 years ago. And we know what technology is doing. The technology is not the issue, right? It's our political will to do it and, privacy and all of those challenges that we need to work through. But there are good interventions. I mean, this one's Ford's My Key. So basically you give your kid a specific key and it speed limits the car, it can traction control limit, it can actually stereo control limit if you wanted to not be able to turn the radio up high and those sorts of things. So, I think there's wonderful ways for us to reshape and rethink about sort of enforcement from that perspective, but I'll push that to a side. The one I really love to talk about also is your alcohol interlocks, which to me is another good example of a more socially conscious way of undertaking restriction and enforcement. I mean, so you've got drink drivers. So they drink drive, and then our response as a society is to fine them excessively, to give them, take the car off them. And what we end up doing with a portion of society is to further spiral their life out of control. They would never be able to pay the fine. They needed their car to get to their job. They needed their car to pick up their kids. You just so if you can put an alcohol interlock in, which just restricts them from undertaking that specific activity when intoxicated, you can get what you want without ruining their life further. Just quickly talk about vehicles. I mean, vehicles are exciting future, but it's a long way off. Like, we're going to see vehicle features filter in. It's a long way off, but we do have hope that as we integrate further and further into autonomy, so we've got levels of autonomy and we're getting more and more autonomous features in the vehicles, like it'll start stopping by itself when it thinks it needs to, or these sorts of things. We're going to see those safety benefits trickle in. The star rating and safety ratings is wonderful, but it's got its limitations. I mean, to get a 5-star safety rating on head-on crash, it's 64 kilometers per hour that you just need to pass the test at. For a side impact with a pole, it's 32 kilometers per hour, right? And you get 5 stars as long as this dummy doesn't get a Maze 3 serious injury, basically an acquired brain injury, right? So 32 kilometers an hour is pretty slow, isn't it, compared to the speed we drive past poles and trees and those sorts of things. So it's just to recognise the limitations of the vehicles. It's an exciting future, but it's a ways off. But we're seeing, you know, good things like pedestrians are now included, so you've got to be able to hit a pedestrian. And like most vehicles now, the bonnet will pop up to give a bit of cushioning, or an airbag will come out of the bonnet. There's lots of exciting sort of features. When do we get to the vehicle like this with no steering wheel? Well, you know, there are a few little shuttles ticking around the place in very sort of geo-coordinated ways. They can only go on certain bits and pieces, but we've got a long time to go, sort of 20, 30 years, I would predict, but others have different opinions. So we've got to continue to work with all of our other existing things as we go. But as I mentioned there, we've got good things happening, like auto emergency braking. So that's a level of autonomy. There we go. We had the Mercedes there. It did brake. It didn't quite brake enough to stop hitting the dummy, but that's actually quite an advantage because it slowed down and it hit it lightly. Okay, it knocked its leg off, but we're getting good advantages from just the slowing down. So crashes are still happening, but they're happening at lower speed, lower severity. And speed. I'm going to spend the last couple of minutes just telling you how important speed is. Speed is so important in road safety, and the reasons are that, a few reasons. It's not a linear relationship between speed and crashes. If you are traveling at 60 kilometers an hour and there's a hazard, a tree we'll call it, at 45 meters away, you are driving along, you see it, tree's probably not a good example. Something steps out. Somebody steps out in front of the vehicle. You've got to react, you've got to process that in your mind, then you lift your leg, and that's all your reaction time. Then the vehicle and the physics, and you need to brake. And at 45 kilometers away, you'll just touch it. Let's go up 10 kilometers an hour, your travel speed, to 70. You hit that at 46 kilometers per hour, not just 10 kilometers per hour more, because it's not a linear relationship. In fact, what we see, and don't worry if you're not a maths person and you don't understand power relationships, but it's a fourth power relationship for fatalities and a third power relationship for serious injuries. Change in speed to change in fatalities or serious injuries. So what that's saying is that small changes in speed have big changes in the fatalities, and a little bit less, but still big changes in serious injuries, and a little bit less for minor injuries. So speed is more important for the more severe crashes, either way, increasing it or decreasing it. But the public and their attitude to speed is just amazing. So this is Tasmanian research on, what do the public think about lowering speed limits, and half of your population doesn't believe that will alter crashes. The worldwide evidence is it will, absolutely. I finished writing the Austrad's Guide to Road Safety Part 3, Speed and Speed Management, which you should have a look at, and just put heaps of research and examples of roads where the speed had been increased and decreased, and it's just such a clear speed limit had been increased. It's so clear that it works, right? But you got to convince the public on that. They're a bit more convinced on the severity of injury when crashes occur and the speed limits being lower. So they're more happy with that. So some more understanding of sort of physics there, although maybe some of them are in the perception that, you can change the speed limit and are we going to get different travel speeds? But really speed's so important, and the Swedes will put a diagram this way, that they basically say, whatever vehicles you have, whatever road you've got, whatever road users you've got, just filter it through speed and you've got a safe transport system. It's the most critical element to the whole thing. And we know we can achieve safe speeds through the infrastructure and or the speed limit. So it's not, it's not one or the other. In fact, we do know we get really good performance when we alter the infrastructure and change speed that way, like a raised platform or a speed hump or something. You don't need to You don't need to put a red circle around a number to make people go slower. We can do that in much more creative ways. Explaining why the speed limit's in place helps. And protection of vulnerable road users, be it kids, the elderly, sick, they're pretty good ones to leverage off. And potentially varying your speed limit by time of day, by risk. You've got some of that already in Tasmania on some of your motorways there and things. You can get these variable speed limits and deploy them when you know risk is occurring, be that from past events, or you can be dynamic with visualizing, sensors and things to alter it. All right. With 1 minute remaining, and I apologise, I sort of jumped along at the end there to try to make sure I got to the point I needed to. Anybody got any questions or comments? I threw a lot at you. The thing you've got to do now is jump into Moodle, do that quiz at some point. We're back again on Thursday. Log in a couple of minutes early for a chance to win a prize with some trivia. Next session, at the end of that, I'll give you a little assignment to do. It's nothing big and huge, but just something to put it into practice. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Get in contact in between if you want. Otherwise, I'll see you a little bit before the session on Thursday. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.